Welcome, comrades. You're listening to The Party Line, a podcast from The Ditch, news and comment from Ireland on theditch.com. I'm Harry Browne.
And I'm Niamh Bhriain. You can follow The Party Line and spread The Party Line and make sure you get on The Ditch WhatsApp feed at ontheditch.com. And from The Ditch today we are joined by Paulie Doyle.
Hello again,
Hi,
Paulie. Good to see you.
Things?
How's the form?
And it's a very warm Party Line welcome back for Eman Mohammed, a brilliant Palestinian photojournalist, blogger, and podcaster. She joined us back in March for a live show here upstairs in the Whistleblower building, and that went out as episode 3 of the Party Line podcast. And yeah, we know the audio wasn't great on that one. Sorry about that. But this time, we promise, she is loud and clear.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be back.
Thanks for coming
delighted. We're going to talk to you in a few minutes about what's happening in Palestine, and including Gaza, of course, and then especially in the context of Israelis and the coming Israeli elections and kind of discourse around the role of Israel. But first, as we do on every episode of this podcast, Paulie, tell us what's in the ditch at the moment.
The story I'm going to talk about today involves a weapons manufacturer based in Ireland, which lobbied someone senior in the Department of Finance about the unintended impact, that's a direct quote from the lobbying return, of sanctions. And this took place around the same time that the watered-down version of the Occupied Territories Bill was passed and signed into law. Honeywell, which is an IDA client company and is based out in Waterford, was looking for some sort of an exemption so it could source what it characterized as critical components for some of the things that it's producing. Now, we're not quite sure exactly what was said at the meeting. We've made inquiries and sent FOIs and that kind of thing. But it's very, very interesting, the timing of it.
Right.
And it's happening in the context of the government being incredibly quiet about companies that it has directly engaged with when it comes to sanctions or the Occupied Territories Bill or that kind of thing. I mean, I've seen parliamentary questions being sent in, for example, to the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Department of Enterprise, asking just what companies have you discussed the Occupied Territories Bill with, or, sanctions on Israel more broadly, or, that kind of thing. They never answer the question. And I don't know, this is maybe some sort of clue about the kinds of meetings that they're having that are informing the decisions that they're making.
So I guess we can assume that the Occupied Territories Bill, even in its watered-down state, which we've discussed in many occasions on this program, that the Occupied Territories Bill was potentially going to have some effect on the capacity of this subsidiary of this big American multinational here in Ireland to trade.
Or that's their understanding of it anyway.
Right.
I mean,
they needed to talk about it.
The Occupied Territories Bill isn't a sanction as well, but I would say that's their understanding of it.
Okay.
I mean, it's compelling us to obey international law, right? And
maybe just in the ditch piece, I think it was the which then relies on some research that had been done by Al Jazeera. There was pretty compelling evidence that a component from this company in Waterford had been used in a very specific attack in Gaza, where they were able to say categorically that 20 people had been killed.
Yeah, it was a piece manufactured by Honeywell, and it was an Al Jazeera investigation which found that in June 2024 there were components produced by them that were found in a rocket that was used to attack a UN-run school. So this company is implicated in what the government says correctly is a genocide. We've also had other instances which we've discussed in the ditch. I mean, a couple of years ago there was Claire Cronin, who was the then ambassador from the United States to Ireland, who wrote to very senior people in the government warning them of unintended consequences. It's also interesting that they've said, this is also unintended.
I would have thought an intended consequence was
precisely. Have you thought this through at all?
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of people maybe who might be, or there's some people who might be worried even at this watered down version. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one. I mean, look, is it appropriate for IDA to be courting these kinds of companies? Where do you draw the line? You know,
When you say that Honeywell is a IDA client company, by the way,
they've
maybe we can
literally
clarify
got-
the Industrial Development Authority, which
Yeah.
is the kind of the instrument of foreign direct investment here in Ireland. What's its specific kind of?
They've received grants
Right.
from IDA Ireland,
Right.
as a kind of an incentive to keep operating here,
Yeah.
and they operate from the IDA investment or the IDA and like park or unit, like industrial estate, excuse me, in County Waterford.
Mm-hmm.
So they're very much back and forth with the state all the time, and they're a valued contributor to the economy. Meanwhile, parts that are being made by this company, which is, has a presence in lots of different countries, are being found in rockets that have killed, dozens of innocent people and are part of an event the government says is genocide. It's perverse.
Yeah, it couldn't be more clear cut.
I mean, aside from the Occupied Territories Bill, which I fear that is going to become more of the so-called ceasefire that we're having in Palestine, just for show and just for cover-up, isn't there some sort of way to say that this is beyond complicit? I mean, it's conflict of interest, but it is, at the same time, it looks like the government are breaking their own laws.
Yeah, it's participation. They're literally subsidizing a company. That's
I mean,
involved
in
this.
the investigation, the Al Jazeera investigation, they are able to place with certainty a component that originated from the company at the site of a a massacre in Gaza. I think it was a guiding device which would have guided the explosion eventually. I mean, that is very compelling evidence if you want to go down a forensic route and actually try and hold a corporation to account for its participation in genocide, or at least implicated in the genocide. I mean, that should that sort of, tracing and then finding responsible and having accountability. That should happen regardless of whether there's an Occupied Territories Bill or not. That should have already been happening as soon as the Al Jazeera investigation came to the fore.
There was an exchange in the Doyle, which was quite interesting, between Micheál Martin and Richard Boyd Barrett. And they were talking about the implications of the Occupied Territories Bill if it included services. And Micheál Martin was saying, well, you want to outright just cut Israel off completely. You want a ban on everything with it. And Richard Boyd Barrett was like, yeah, I do, yeah. And Micheál Martin turned around and said, do you really want Intel not to be able to, trade with itself and to be able to do business? And I thought it was very, very interesting then when this completely neutered version of the Occupied Territories Bill passed, that one of the first things that was reported in the news was that Intel had announced this massive investment in Ireland, all completely unconnected, I'm sure, and I'm sure they've never actually directly engaged with the state on the potential consequences of the Occupied Territories Bill having actual teeth.
I don't know if there's a connection at all between these two things, but Ireland passes the Occupied Territories Bill in a completely gutted, watered-down version, and at the same time it refuses visas for Palestinian students based in Gaza to be able to travel here to study with scholarships that are completely funded, and they've already received their university places. And I just wonder if those students are caught up in a situation where the government is trying to show, look, we passed this Occupied Territories Bill, but we're still prepared to be tough on Palestine. And so this is us showing the US and showing, our European counterparts, that we're not a soft touch. We can be tough in Palestine.
And of course, tough on immigration as well, which is something we've talked about in previous episodes.
These students are caught up in the middle of this, football, where the Irish government is, it's going over and back. It's seen as being soft on Palestine by passing this bill. So now it can show it's tough on Palestine. And it's absolutely outrageous. If you look at, the reporting from RTE on this, I think it was Emma O'Kelly who was, she read out some of the letters that the students received in Gaza. And it's like, well, your visa has been rejected because you cannot provide evidence of why there's a gap in your education. Now, every single university in Gaza has been obliterated. And the Irish state, somebody sat down and wrote that letter to every single student who received it. Somebody actually sat and wrote that. Those people should be held accountable for writing these kinds of letters. I mean, you know, they sat down and wrote, you cannot account for the gaps in your education. I mean, have you not been paying attention? There's been a genocide. Every single university has been obliterated.
That's very good reporting by Emma in RT, and of course very good reporting by the Ditch there. Paulie, well done to the Ditch for that investigation. We're going to turn to some really bad reporting that we came across in the New Yorker. It was published a few weeks ago, but it's worth coming back to, I think, because it's a really important kind of moment in the history of the Gaza genocide that the New Yorker has done this massive piece headlined, How Biden Enabled Israel's Aggression Towards Gaza and Iran. And the subheadline is, Top officials from the previous administration now express regret over their failure to rein in Netanyahu. Biden in the headline, Netanyahu in the subheadline, this kind of personalized version of where things might have gone a bit wrong over the last couple of years. So if journalism is the first draft of history, this piece of non-Ditch media for this week is a thorough effort to draft an exoneration for American liberalism broadly and its complicity in the Gaza genocide. And of course, in some respects, an apologia for all of the conscientious liberals who feel bad now about the way things went down in Gaza. So it's a very, very long piece. We won't get to discuss most or all of it. But it is, by the way, I've used the word genocide a couple of times in relation to it. The piece itself does not use the word genocide in relation to what happened in Gaza. And it's based entirely on quotes from named and unnamed U.S. and Israeli sources. Particularly the former Secretary of State Antony Blinken and the former National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, who are the main exonerated characters here, presumably angling for their place in the next Democratic administration, which will have to come in on some form of regret about what happened in Gaza.
I think it's just insane the level of audacity in that piece of funneling propaganda on behalf of U.S. officials like Jack Sullivan and Antony Blinken, who are having such late regrets, quote unquote, to self-serve and just backpedal, not even backpedaling the fact that this was a genocide. They denied it on air, they denied it while they were in office, and they continue to deny any knowledge of this genocide. But it's kind of contradicts what had been shown about the letter from the ICRC saying that in every possible way, this is, in so many words, a genocide, and Palestinians who are being held hostage in Israeli concentration camps are getting tortured to death.
By the way, this piece opens with this letter
Right.
and how it was that the administration coped with getting a letter from the International Committee of the Red Cross saying,
Buried it, completely buried the letter.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the reporting showed us a lot of what that letter said. I mean, I think the only journalistic aspect about this is to publish the letter as well. But the letter had been buried, and it was a very obvious way to not. They can't backpedal from the ICRC saying this is a genocide, an early stage of that genocide escalating. So I find it so hard I found it so hard to go through this lengthy word count that really shows the ability to publish PR on behalf of U.S. officials and blame it all on Netanyahu, as if Netanyahu was like the sole actor. Nobody could have stopped him.
Let me give a couple of lines that cover this kind of PR aspect of it. Some Biden advisors privately lamented the fact that U.S. protection was unintentionally encouraging Netanyahu's brinksmanship. Another one, Jake Sullivan told me that Biden and his advisors had often privately debated ways to restrain Israel. And then to move on to Blinken, Antony Blinken anxiously asked his staff how Israel could justify this scale of destruction. A senior State Department official told me we were all shocked at how aggressive and deadly it was, and asking, what the fuck are they doing? the obscenity, of course,
Those
shows just how
arguments
shocked they
are
were.
facade.
Yeah,
Like
they're
I
absolutely,
have no doubt that they never happened. If they happened, they were like really watered down version from what the quotes are saying.
Yeah,
Because
and even if they did happen,
you don't have them, and you send 2 billion worth of arms
Yes.
in less than 2 years. You just
Yeah.
you can't. It doesn't make sense. And the ability to have these conversations, have the public resignations from a lot of U.S. officials, very much clear on the reason why they are quitting their jobs. It comes at a time where you can't help it but raise your eyebrow and be like, really? Like,
Yeah.
were you in a coma for the past 2-3 years now? What happened there?
we literally have Sullivan told me that he'd lain awake many nights, thinking about this non-genocide, presumably.
But it's as if they were kind of involved in this kind of minor mishap, and they expressed regret about it. There's nothing to kind of take account of how serious that this is a genocide. It's still going on, and they were front and center of it. And it's like, they now kind of express regret at what their part in it, and they explain that there were these conversations going on in the background where they didn't really mean it, and like there's at one point there's a few lines around kind of that they had thought about kind of putting something in place to restrain Israel, and then they kind of say, well, actually it looked like we were getting close to a ceasefire, so we kind of thought, well, we shouldn't, because the ceasefire it's about to turn a corner.
Yeah, and we don't want to give Hamas any encouragement when we're almost there.
Yeah, we're almost there.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
thing, and they keep saying at various points, this thing will be over and done with in 2 weeks. And they're, but at the same time, the article is like, at this point, there were 17,000 Palestinians killed. At this point, there were 30,000 Palestinians killed. Then they move on and say, Rafah was a red line, and it's like they're trying to be tough.
Yeah.
The next day.
And it's like what Rafah is wiped out, and there's at no point is there any kind of reckoning in the piece with, even if this was what was going on internally and they were in a coma, what we know now is that they are fully participant in a genocide. They need to be held account to a court that is now being dismantled by the current U.S. regime.
The 2 weeks thing, I just want to dwell on that for a moment, because they actually make light of it. In early 2024, Blinken told Netanyahu's advisor, Ron Dermer, I don't want to hear that phrase 2 more weeks ever again. Dermer responded with a joke, okay, I will say fortnight. And then Blinken says, were they being genuine or were they being disingenuous?
I mean, you have 5,000 or more words with barely any mention of Palestinian casualties.
Yeah, and no Palestinian voices.
No,
Yeah.
no quote. There's a million quote from Jack Sullivan and Blinken, but there's none. And U.S. officials who are not even backpedaling, but sanitizing their complicity, I think, in fear of being held accountable legally.
So let's talk about that. Why now are we doing this kind of? We were always against it. That somehow we were quietly against it. We were trying to be against it in diplomatic ways, but we were always against it, sort of.
I believe that just from how Western media operates, mainstream media.
And you've worked in some Western mainstream
absolutely.
media. Yeah.
And the way that they became a very clear mouthpiece for the propaganda of the government, whichever government, the U.S. government or the occupation, the Israeli occupation. The ability to come out and say that this piece was published, and look, 5,000 words that we're talking about, all this complicity.
I wish it were only 5,000 words, Iman. It's more like 12,000, I think.
The complexity, I think that's when my brain shut down. The complexity of American complicity. It's so complex that we can't even tell you why we were complicit. So we're going to tangle it so much that we're going to neuter our laws when it comes to accountability when genocide is announced, which had been announced to them according to that letter. Mm-hmm. If you received that letter, that's it. That should trigger Leahy laws and other laws that had been neutered by the U.S. to shelter Israel. I've never seen this, but it makes sense when a colonial entity want to shield another one for their own profit. But more than anything, I don't think the people realize the power of pushing for accountability legally now. So getting officials taking a stand in a court, in the same courts that they try to gaslight the world by saying we abide by these laws. We are civil. We have laws, that we have red tape. We have red line. But see, they've been crossed against our will. With the moment that there is any kind of assault by the Israeli occupation on Iran or on Lebanon, the U.S. fighters are the ones that are taken off to protect them from fire back. And it doesn't make them just a nice ally. It makes them complicit actively.
Participants.
Yes.
Absolutely. More than complicit. As
Not just backing this genocide by money, not just by weapons. You're making decisions within your own law to protect them.
So these are these officials washing their hands in the court of the New Yorker, as it were, to avoid the possibility that they may have to face another kind of court.
There was a joke that the comedian Frankie Boyle told about the United States. And he said that they won't just invade your country. They'll come back years later and make a movie about how doing so made their soldiers sad. That joke came to mind as I was reading that piece. I mean, these are people whose hands are dripping in blood, behaving as though they're like Mr. Magoo. Oh, I slipped on a banana peel, and the Israelis were they just took control of the White House, and there was nothing we could do about it. Oh well, and I also thought that very often when a genocide takes place, a part of it is its denial. So we're not just going to eradicate you, we're going to pretend that it didn't happen. And then also we'll just kind of shrug our shoulders and say, well, what could we have done?
Yeah.
And that is all of those things.
Netanyahu played us.
Netanyahu played us, as if you're not like, okay, well then you should, even if that was true, you should still go to prison for allowing yourself to be played like that.
I mean, just following orders, just being played by Netanyahu, they're in the same category of
maybe
excuse.
that's worth they've downplayed the complicity, but the complicity that they admit to is still extremely damning and still indictable. So even on those terms, all of these people deserve to spend the rest of their lives behind bars. I
mean, we could do a whole episode on this piece, I think. I shout out to the Citations Needed podcast, actually, where they did do a whole 45-minute episode on this piece, and definitely recommend that you check that out a couple of weeks ago. So worth listening back to. But let's move on and talk more broadly, Eman, about the kind of the place that we find ourselves now in August 2026, almost 3 years on from the beginning of the genocide, and the extent to which we're seeing this kind of, a return to normality in the discourse. Of course, in Gaza, the genocide continues, but in the discourse, a kind of like, well, now, maybe we've got a chance to move on from Netanyahu, and there's a whole, if you like, a kind of a re-politicizing of Israel and its place in the world and its relations to Europe and its relations to the U.S. Where do you see that?
I think there's a massive pushback on that with the Israeli election coming up, because just the idea that a genocidal entity would have election is laughable. So let alone all the PR they are pushing, all the contradictions that you're seeing, not only on officials' leadership within the Israeli occupation, but also surrounding them. You see the calls between Trump and Netanyahu every 2 seconds. Call off, it's like a joke. It is a joke. Call off, if people weren't actually dying, it would be hilarious. But it's you can see the disregard to Palestinians and the disregard to Palestinian lives. And just to touch on the, I know I'm going back on the visas letters. Every visa denial letter I've ever got with my Palestinian passport, the reason was not listed. They wrote it by handwritten, note on the paper. So you know how the system works. It didn't change for the Palestinians at all, especially Palestinians in Gaza. But you're seeing a lot of confusion, if you want to call it, happening to what is the right course to get the voters. To get the voters not throw out just Netanyahu, but also not see, and this piece that we discussed, not see Trump and Biden as same. Because in the U.S., they are losing a lot of votes to people that have more to lose and really have higher stakes in what the U.S. should represent rather than shielding Israel. So I think it's such a weird place to be within this world now, seeing how it all plays, not knowing what is going to happen in 2 months or at the end of October when the Israeli elections are happening. We're seeing a lot of quote-unquote left-wing Israeli groups coming to the surface.
Let's talk about that. Like standing together and this
Yes.
new Israeli so-called Arab and Jewish list of, a party. What is it called? A place for all of us? Something like that? That's standing as a joint
I have
50,
no
50,
interest.
50?
Yes, I think it's always been there. By the way, it's just getting more eyes on what they are doing, on their work, on their videos, on their social media, and as Palestinians, we're just sick and tired of having to go through explaining why is a nicer bad guy is not good guy. The fact that you're part of the occupation, you cannot bring liberation when we're pretending that we're equal while we're under genocide, and you're not. And I think there are so many issues with what these groups are proposing, starting with that they are not protesting against the genocide per se as much as they are protesting against not having a moral occupation. They want the occupation, just a moral occupation, a nicer version of it that is not hated by the entire world, that is not criticized, that is not having Trump as their first ally and their best buddy. They feel the wrath of boycotting and sanctions among the people. And I think that worries a certain category, but it's like microscopic category. It's the same category that refuses to enlist with the army, for an example, with the Israeli occupation forces.
Before we get on to the kind of the good Israeli side of things, can we talk about the Palestinians who do that work with them, who provide the other half of a movement like this Standing
Right.
Together, or a place for all of us? I mean, you've been in the situation yourself where you've worked with, as it were, good Israelis on some basis of cooperation and mutual recognition.
I think it doesn't take a lot to see that this is not a valuable solution. It's not possible that it can be a valuable addition to the liberation movement. And that happens quite a lot in Gaza now. We have journalists who are contributing to Israeli outlets like 972 magazine and even with Hearts.
Yeah.
And you see that they are getting that fulfillment, that temporary fulfillment of, our voice is heard. But it won't take long for them to see that this does not add up to liberation. It only adds up to aesthetic illusion that we're equal. That I will let you come and sit next to me. Well, we're not equal. We don't disagree on that. We are occupied. They are the occupier. But in that setting, when you see Palestinians doing the dirty work for the occupation by cleaning up their image of, it's not all Israelis, but they are all enlisting with the Israeli occupation forces that are torturing Palestinians day and night, and you don't get to choose unless you say, no, I'm not getting into that. And I think the Palestinians who are getting involved are either heavily criticized and sometimes excommunicated by the society because it's very hard to play that game during active genocide, ongoing genocide. Back when
So whatever, 10
10
years ago or 15 years ago?
Right. I mean, it was never direct either. So I would be invited to exhibitions, for an example, as a photojournalist from Gaza, and there would be work of other left-wing Israeli photojournalists. Now that our awareness as communities, as people is and we're more vigilant, and it's definitely harder to say, I didn't know. You have to examine every opportunity that comes to you, especially if it comes too easy. And nothing comes to Palestinians in Gaza or journalists. I have to emphasize that nothing comes to them easy. However, it serves them. It doesn't serve us. It
serves them. I want to dig into that a little bit because, I assume that you recognize that 972, for example, has done some really good and important work. I'm
Absolutely.
sure we've discussed some of their investigations on here, including into the Lavender AI system, for example. So for the good Israelis, as it were, to do the work as journalists or as activists or whatever within their own society, that's the limits in which they find themselves. We recognize that as, for them,
But
good
it's
work.
not, is it? Because they are benefiting from this occupation. Like when you get like Lavender, the AI system, when you get those leaks, how do you get them? How do you have those sources? Are you rubbing shoulders with IOF soldiers and leadership that are so complicit to their knees with this genocide? It's a trap because it's so. I'm not saying that it's bad for the cause. I'm saying it's not serving the cause, because we do look like it makes it easier to disregard the 80% survey that had been done internally within Haaretz and said that 80% of the Israelis support ethnically cleansing Palestinians.
All right, so
from
look,
Gaza.
but 972 revealed the existence of Lavender. It may have done so through those contacts, but it did reveal it. It brought it to public attention and caused Haaretz did report that polling, and it indicates that left liberal opinion in Israel is tiny, is overwhelmed. So they are in a sense doing critique from within their own society.
They are, because it's impossible if you're a sane person to not look around you and see that this is a genocidal system and it's going down. It's being dismantled as we speak. The fact that they are doing the work does not mean that I have to give them a cookie.
Okay, great. And in terms of it going down, do these elections bear any relevance to the way that Zionism eventually is going to be damaged or destroyed? I mean, do you see the elections as something that's worth our interest at all, or is it a distraction?
I always bet on the people. I never bet on Israeli settlers. So I think it's going to be a surprise for the world to see how the Israeli elections go, and all these voices that they hear amplified on social media going against the occupation will eventually choose the occupation. The issue is not that they are not doing some of the moral work. The issue that they still want it to be contained within the occupational system and within the apartheid state. They want it to be a better apartheid state, but it can still be. That's where you hear the conversations about two-state solution on one land. You can't have two states on one land. It never proved to work, and I will be surprised if I ever see it working. But please, prove me wrong. And I think it's going to show us a lot of dynamics that the world wasn't paying attention to before October 2023 when it comes to how the Israeli government forms, what exactly drives the votes, what do people want to see. We're seeing Trump continuously saying that he told Israel to stop dropping bombs. And we continuously see higher and higher numbers of Palestinians slaughtered in Gaza. So it's intensifying, it's escalating. And that is simply because Netanyahu does not give a damn about what the U.S. says. The Israelis do not give a damn about what the U.S. says. And their biggest issue now is how to not let it fracture more than it already did from the inside.
I'm not sure if we want to get into this or not, but just as you were talking, because you mentioned 972 and just the kind of the question of it serves them and not us. And it reminded me of a few months or a few weeks back when the news broke that Sally Rooney's book, Intermezzo, that actually the rights to have it translated into Hebrew, that there had been a deal done that, as I understand it, got the blessing from the BDS to have the book translated, and that it was a deal that was brokered between, I think, her and 971, so that it would be made available in Hebrew.
It's a publishing house connected to 972, yes, indeed, yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that, and kind of just thinking of the question of it serves them, not us. How does it serve the Palestinian people to have Intermezzo available in Hebrew?
Well, that's the issue, is that it doesn't. It does not.
Yeah.
I don't know if the BDS gave its blessings. I didn't see that. But I know that when you boycott, you boycott.
Yeah.
You don't make exceptions to make it better for the minority of good people within this monstrous entity, you worry. It's like it's a repetition of pattern that we see again and again and again in the West. The dehumanization of Palestinians is so okay, so normalized, so agreed on, that even when you take a stand by saying, no, I'm not gonna let you read my work or see my work as an artist, I'm not, you quickly get those other opportunities to have less impact on the people. We don't want to inconvene the settlers in occupied Palestine. But meanwhile, we're seeing the numbers of 300 and more as conservative estimates, according to the Lancet, and that
300,000 dead in the genocide. Yeah,
and that doesn't move a muscle. On the contrary, like you can see where the bias lies.
Yeah,
and it doesn't help Palestinians. It doesn't at all. It only helps Israel as a genocidal entity, as a colonial state, to not feel the wrath of the BDS movement.
Yeah. And I remember when it happened, and the coverage was very much celebrating it as there has been an advance now. Sally Rooney's book is available in Hebrew, and it was being celebrated. And then, and I can't remember her surname, Susan, who wrote Mornings in Janine.
Susan Abul Hawa.
Yes. She wrote an excellent commentary setting out all of what you were saying, how this does not serve Palestinian liberation. Why are we celebrating this? And she was immediately shot down for, as
she gets shot down.
She's shot down all the time. But I just thought it was an excellent commentary, and I just cannot understand, having sat on a panel with Sally Rooney at the BDS super event that was in Dublin in I think it was in March. I presume the deal had been done at that stage, because it was very shortly afterwards when the news broke that there had been this deal that the book would be available in Hebrew. I just can't get my head around.
Can I try to help us get our head around it? Because I do feel I should step in here. Particularly, I've been involved in BDS stuff for a very long time, including on Academics for Palestine. And the thing about a boycott is that there are lines and rules that are drawn. It's not, you can't just say we're going to boycott everything that has to do with anything that might possibly be, right? Any individual, and this particular boycott has a series of very detailed, very legalistic sets of conditions about the kinds of contacts that are legitimate and the kinds that are regarded as boycottable. It's not, there are categories, and maybe it's excessively legalistic, maybe it's excessively bureaucratic, but that's what it is, and it comes from a place where. A place of, from the call was first made 20 years ago, the conditions of the boycott were set down by the international BDS movement probably more than 10 years ago now. So if you were trying to figure out exactly what institutions are boycottable or not, you're looking at these websites that are kind of go back to that period. But they do set out, the kinds of contacts that are still seen as legitimate. And the ones that aren't. And it is the case that Sally Rooney is an adherent of BDS, and that the publication of this book under these conditions was seen as being not only not in violation of BDS, but actually sort of in the spirit of BDS. That, in other words, there are institutions that, by virtue of one aspect or another of their work, or of the individuals involved with them, or of their stances, that can be, if you like, not boycottable. It's absolutely, of course, you can disagree with that and think that the boycott. And over the years, I've had people come to Academics for Palestine and say, "We want to boycott this," and I say, "Yeah, feel free to boycott it, but it's not under the BDS rules that you're boycotting it."
Are we fault? Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, like, if you go to the essence of it, it just doesn't feel right. And I suppose I was just thinking about it when you were saying about the place for all of us, or us all, and the kind of what you were saying about there's the occupier and the occupied, but we sit at the same table, so it's fine. Just that one is occupied and the other is an occupying presence. I suppose it just, I was just thinking about it in that context. But sorry, I cut across.
I just wonder, are we looking, and I mean, I respect the BDS movement a great deal. I definitely see the work that they are doing very effectively. But is that the blueprint that we saw in South Africa, for an example? Is it?
Well, there were absolutely people and institutions in South Africa that you could cooperate with, and ones that you couldn't under the we didn't call it BDS at the time,
Right.
but under the boycott movement that was in place.
But I think the whole principle is to cut all oxygen off this entity, so it would be dismantled from
But the entity is the state.
Right.
Yeah. So and any particular individual or institution that happens to exist in that state is not necessarily the same as the state itself.
But you are actively supporting the occupation by your presence, by being a settler there, by joining the IDF, IOF. You're actively participating. It becomes almost like a different version of Jack Sullivan and Antony Blinken long monologue about how they didn't know, and when they knew, they didn't know what to do, and they tried to have those debates, but then accidentally sent 20 billion in arms to Israel. Like, it takes off the guilt and it just misplace it on Palestinians who will have to suffer the consequences.
But is it a moral act to boycott, or is it a strategic one? Is
I
it
think both.
Yeah.
Shouldn't it be both? I mean, I do look at the BDS movement website, but if it feels wrong, it feels wrong. And I can backpedal myself and go back to events that I was part of, and just having panel with Breaking the Silence, which is a group that brings Israeli soldiers who are ex-soldiers at that point to cry over the crimes that they committed. Like, was that a moral or strategic? Maybe in the moment it felt strategic, so I would be able to present my experience as a Palestinian living in Gaza, but it gave a platform where like the liberation movement should take its direction from Palestinians.
And again, Breaking the Silence does work within Israeli society that we may regard as valuable or helpful in terms of changing views within Israeli society. But that's not necessarily the perspective that a Palestinian or an outsider needs to adopt.
I don't think that it's a perspective that would lead us to liberation and equal rights and equal human rights. It's not going to get me full human rights. You don't grant it. It's taken, and it's taken for a reason, because at no point was the Israeli entity interested in granting Palestinians human rights. They thrive on their slaughter. So to have that dynamic, that kind of equation, and then say, well, maybe if we change their mind, it's there's a thinker, a philosopher, a writer. I'm blinking on the name, but said that it's assuming, it's an African American one who said it's assuming that they have conscience. He was talking about the U.S. They have none. And it's assuming that they have this moral compass. And with Israeli settlers, I don't think there is a moral compass, not with 80% believing that ethnically cleansing Palestinians is the right move.
When you say Israeli settlers, you are assuming the two words to be essentially
When I say Israeli
synonymous.
settlers, I mean all Israelis
Yeah.
born there after their grandfather came and stole a house from Palestinians, or just came there from any Western country or even Arab country. I believe that Israelis are all settlers on stolen land. And same applies to the U.S., but that's a longer debate for a different time.
So to come back to the election then, and to the prospect of Netanyahu out or otherwise, what that might mean. Secondly, what it might reflect in terms of the conscientiousness or otherwise of what you call Israeli settlers.
I mean, it's so hard for us as Palestinians to care, to be honest, because it's just like under Biden and under Trump, Palestinians lived the same reality. It's just one handed them the gun, the other one pulled the trigger. It was just a matter of time. So we never put a lot of stock or a lot of trust into the outcome of the occupation's election. It's still going to be an occupation. That's not going to change. But I think the infight within Israel is something to pay attention to, and how exposed they are, their policies, their internal affairs, everything that they do within the state is so exposed to the world who couldn't care less before a genocide was televised 24/7 in front of them, and they couldn't look anywhere and not see it. So I think that's definitely going to play against them. I think the world is going to understand why a good Israeli myth does not serve liberation. If you want to say there are good Israelis, fine, I'll say it with you. But they are microscopic, and liberation does not come from microscopic entities. That's just not how it happens. So what is the end goal? And I think with the election, I'm seeing, with at least the PR that they are rolling and the PR laundering that they are rolling, they just don't care. All parties in Israel, they just don't care. You would not hear an Israeli from Together, the movement that is trying to rise to be electable, saying Palestinians, they say Arab, and they repeat it again and again. We're Arab citizen of Israel. We're not Palestinians. We don't have an identity within that movement. And now they might rebrand and improve. But I wonder if that's, I think the world is forcing their hand rather than it's coming genuinely. And that is something I wish I was wrong about. I truly, genuinely wish that I was wrong about everything that I said in regard of the conscience of Israelis within Israel and obviously occupied Palestine.
I think we'll leave it there on that note. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks a million
Thank
for
you.
coming in.
Great
Thank
discussion, and we really appreciate it. And thanks, Paulie.
you. Yeah,
of course.
thanks a million, Paulie.
Do go to ontheditch.com, donate, subscribe, get on that WhatsApp feed, follow the party line wherever you can, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.